Planet Reddit. Today's story is...
My mother demanded that her 25-year younger boyfriend give me to her at the wedding in exchange for $5,000. His response when I refused destroyed what was left of our relationship. I have dreamed of my wedding for as long as I can remember. Not in that idealized way of a princess riding off into the sunset, but imagining a day where all the important people in my life would gather to celebrate something truly special. It was supposed to be an event full of joy and excitement, filled with laughter, hugs, maybe a few tears of happiness, and just a positive atmosphere. However, here I am, just 1 week away from the big day, and instead of feeling excited and happy, I find myself immersed in a strange mixture of anger, sadness, and guilt. It's the last thing I expected to feel at this moment. Let me backtrack a little to give some context. I'm 28 and my fiancé Nathan and I have been together for 3 years. He really is my special someone, my unconditional support, my biggest cheerleader, simply the best partner I could wish for. We have been planning this wedding for over a year now, and although we are not exactly rolling in money, we have saved enough to create a day that we can be proud of. Nothing extravagant, just a simple but elegant ceremony followed by a cozy reception with our closest friends and family. From the start, we made it clear that we didn't expect anyone to contribute financially. We didn't want to put that kind of pressure on anyone, and we were happy to cover all the expenses ourselves. That said, there is a certain history with my mother that has been latent for years. Money has always been a sensitive issue with her. On the one hand, she constantly tells me how limited she is financially. On the other hand, her spending habits have always told a very different story. Designer handbags. Of course. Fancy dinners at restaurants where the starters cost as much as my weekly food shop? Definitely. Spontaneous weekend getaways that she then posts on Instagram with phrases like, "pamper yourself." Without a doubt, during my childhood, this pattern was frustrating, to say the least. When I asked her about it, she would either completely shut down or deflect the responsibility onto someone else, making it seem like nothing was her fault. As a child, it was confusing, but I learned to live with it. Now, as an adult, I have made a conscious effort to keep my expectations low when it comes to her and money. It has been my strategy to avoid that familiar disappointment. When Nathan and I got engaged, my mother's reaction was not exactly what I expected. Instead of showing great enthusiasm for me, her first response was to apologize, expressing how sorry she was that she couldn't help finance the wedding. I immediately assured her that it was no problem and I really meant it. The last thing I wanted was for her to feel guilty or pressured. For me, her presence and emotional support were much more important than any financial contribution. However, over the following months, she continued to bring up the subject. Every time the wedding came up in conversation, she somehow found a way to mention her financial difficulties. It wasn't like she was offering a direct apology. It felt more like a subtle reminder that I shouldn't expect anything from her. Honestly, it stung a little, but I told myself I shouldn't make a big deal out of it. I didn't want money, or the lack of it, to create a rift between us. And then about 2 months ago, everything suddenly changed. My mom started dating a guy named Kyle. She's 53, he's 30. Let's just say this wasn't what I was expecting. My mother had always dated men closer to her own age, so this represented a big departure from her usual pattern. I admit it baffled me. What's more, Kyle is only a couple of years older than me, which made the whole situation feel strange. Really strange. It's hard to explain, but the dynamic just seemed off from the start. I kept telling myself, well, if he makes her happy, that's what matters. But the truth is that Kyle's personality has made it difficult for me to get close to him. He's loud, opinionated, and has this habit of monopolizing conversations. Somehow, everything ends up revolving around him. You know the type. He will take the most casual comment and turn it into an opportunity to share some long and tedious story about his life or his opinions. It's exhausting. Despite all this, my mother seemed completely in love. She was glowing in a way I hadn't seen in a long time, so I held my comments and kept my feelings to myself. After all, it's her life, not mine. But even though I kept telling myself not to judge, I couldn't shake this uneasy feeling. Kyle wasn't just someone new in her life. He was starting to take up a lot of space in mine too. And with the wedding approaching, things were about to get even more complicated. Last week, My mother showed up at my apartment completely out of the blue, which was already something unexpected, but she didn't come alone. She brought Kyle to formally introduce him to us. From the moment he entered, he dominated the room, launching into this lengthy self-praise monologue about his life achievements. I can't even tell you what half of it was about because my mind kind of switched off after the first 5 minutes. I just nodded and tried to be as polite as possible, although I felt extremely uncomfortable the whole time. Then, suddenly, my mother took out an envelope and handed it to me. Inside was a check for $5,000 for the wedding. I was stunned. This is the same woman who had spent the last year reminding me over and over again how limited I was financially and how I couldn't help out financially. I didn't even know how to react. I just sat there, staring at the check, trying to process what was happening. Before I could even thank her or ask where the sudden generosity had come from, she dropped the real surprise. She wanted Kyle to walk me down the aisle. I honestly thought I had misheard her at first. I mean, what? Walk me down the aisle? Kyle, a man I had met barely 15 minutes before who, let's face it, was more interested in talking about himself than in really getting to know me. His justification: he said that Kyle had become such an important part of his life, and he wanted him to feel included in the family. I was completely perplexed. I have spent years coming to terms with the fact that my father would not be there to walk me down the aisle. It has been an emotional process, but I have finally reached a point of acceptance in this regard. My Uncle Robert, who has been like a second father to me since my father passed away, had already agreed to take on that role. That she would suggest replacing him with Kyle, someone who is basically a stranger to me, felt so absurd and honestly like a betrayal. I tried to remain calm. I told her, as politely as I could, that although I really appreciated her incredibly generous offer to contribute financially, I couldn't accept her request. For years, I had imagined my uncle, and that was when things took a negative turn. She quickly became defensive. Suddenly, I was ungrateful and disrespectful. He accused me of rejecting his happiness and not being willing to welcome Kyle into my life. Then he dealt me the lowest blow imaginable. He involved my father in this, saying that he would have wanted me to move on and allow someone else to take on that role. It felt so manipulative and hurtful, as if he were using my father's memory against me. I stood my ground and explained that this wasn't about rejecting her happiness or Kyle, but about honoring the plans she had already made and the people who have been there for me in good times and bad. She wouldn't listen. She took the check from my hand, stormed out with Kyle following her, and left me standing there, completely devastated. Since then, she has been ignoring all my calls and messages. The only time she responded was to send me a short, curt message saying that the ball was in my court and that I needed to fix things. It's like she's putting this whole situation on me, and I have no idea how to even begin to resolve it. In the days since, I've tried to focus on the final preparations for the wedding, but the weight of her ultimatum has been hard to ignore. My Uncle Robert called me after she contacted him to explain her side of the story, and now he feels uncomfortable about walking me down the aisle. Meanwhile, Kyle has been posting ambiguous updates on social media that seem aimed at me, insinuating that I am selfish and ungrateful. It's all getting excessive. Am I being unreasonable by standing firm? Should I just give in to keep the peace? Or is this another example of his manipulative tendencies? And do I need to set clear boundaries? I feel that whichever way I choose, someone will get hurt. I could really use some outside perspective right now. Update 1. It's been a couple of days since I shared everything that happened, and, honestly, the support I've received has been simply amazing. Reading the comments has been eye-opening in many ways. It's like holding a mirror up to parts of my life that I hadn't really wanted to look at closely. Many pointed out that my mother's behavior seems manipulative, and although I've always known it could be difficult, I didn't realize how much I've normalized her actions over the years. It's hard to admit, but they're absolutely right. After taking some time to reflect on everything, I decided to try contacting her one more time. I wasn't feeling particularly optimistic, but I needed to try for my own peace of mind, if nothing else. As she still wasn't answering my calls, I thought an email might be the best option. Writing it gave me the opportunity to gather my thoughts and explain how I felt without the risk of the situation turning into another heated argument. In the email, I tried to be as calm and clear as possible. I expressed how deeply hurt and confused I felt about everything that had happened. I explained why having Uncle Robert walk me down the aisle was so important to me, not only because he is family, but because he has been a constant and loving father figure since my father passed away. I also pointed out how annoying it was that he used the $5,000 as a kind of bargaining tool and then threatened not to attend the wedding. And finally, I told him that although I understand his enthusiasm for Kyle and want him to feel included, it is unfair and frankly inappropriate to impose him in such a significant role on a day that is supposed to be about Nathan and me. To my surprise, she replied within hours. Her email was, well, let's just say it was a mixed bag. She started by apologizing for being too intense, which gave me a brief glimmer of hope. But then the tone changed, and things went downhill from there. She accused me of being close-minded about Kyle, and claimed that I wasn't giving him a fair chance to be part of the family. And then she revealed another surprise. She and Kyle are planning to move in together next month. Yes, after only 2 months of dating. She wrote about it as if it were the most normal thing in the world, as if that alone should justify why she deserves to play such an important role in my wedding. To make matters worse, she casually mentioned that the $5,000 she had offered wasn't all from her. It was partially from Kyle. That little detail made me feel even more uncomfortable about the whole situation. After reading her email, Nathan and I sat down to talk about everything. I need time to process it before deciding how to respond, or even if I should respond. At this point, my mental health must come first, and I can't keep getting dragged into this drama. Throughout all of this, Uncle Robert has been absolutely my rock. When I told him about my mother's latest email, he reassured me without hesitation that he was still fully prepared to walk me down the aisle. He made it clear that he doesn't want me to worry about any of these complications and just wants me to focus on enjoying my big day. His support has been a blessing. It's exactly what I needed to hear at the moment. In the meantime, I've realized how much this situation is affecting other areas of my life. For example, when I sat down to work on the seating plan, it dawned on me. How many people would I have to explain things to if my mother didn't actually attend? There would be a lot of awkward conversations about her absence. People will ask, and I will have to decide whether to give the full story, keep it ambiguous, or just change the subject. None of these options seem ideal. I mean, how do you casually explain that your mother was absent from your wedding because you didn't allow her boyfriend of 2 months to walk you down the aisle? And as if things weren't complicated enough, my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, called me yesterday. Apparently, my mother had shared parts of the story with her, and Linda wanted to know what was really going on. I could tell she was trying to remain neutral, but the more I explained the situation, the more I could hear the frustration in her voice. Linda has always been the mediator in our family, the one who tries to keep the peace and smooth over conflicts, so I wasn't surprised when she offered to talk to my mother. I really appreciate her intervention, but to be honest, I don't have high hopes. My mother has this way of digging in her heels when she feels she's been wronged. And I don't know if anyone, even Linda, can make her see reason at this point. Even so, it's comforting to know that I have people willing to try. No matter how all this turns out, I am determined not to let it ruin what is supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. In the end, this wedding is about Nathan and me, about the love we share and the life we are building together. I keep reminding myself of that every time I feel the weight of the drama hanging over me. I also want to take this opportunity to thank everyone who has reached out with advice, encouragement, and kind words. Honestly, it has been a great comfort to know that I am not alone in this. Your support has helped me find the strength to stand firm and focus on what really matters. I will update you soon with what happens next. I'm keeping my fingers crossed for a resolution, but either way, I'm prepared to walk down that aisle with the people who really support me. Update 2. Things have taken an unexpected and frankly worrying turn. Yesterday, my mother's best friend, Joan, got in touch with me. I've always liked Joan. She's kind, sensible, and one of those people who always seems to have good judgment. She's also known my mother for over 20 years, so if anyone can sense when something isn't right, it's her. Apparently, Joan has been increasingly concerned about my mother's relationship with Kyle, and what she shared with me was both shocking and heartbreaking. According to her, Kyle actually moved in with my mother almost a month ago, not next month, as my mother had stated in her email. That little detail alone took me by surprise, but then it got worse. Joan informed me that Kyle is between jobs, which realistically sounds like a polite way of saying he's unemployed. She mentioned that she ran into my mother at an ATM last week and noticed that she was making unusually large cash withdrawals. When she casually asked her about it, my mother immediately became defensive and evasive, which set off all kinds of alarm bells for Joan. She's worried that Kyle might be taking advantage of my mother financially, and honestly, I can't say that thought hasn't crossed my mind too. The whole situation is moving so fast, too fast. They've only known each other a couple of months, and he's already living in her house, and apparently has access to her money. It's a lot to take in. And now, remembering that $5,000 wedding check, I can't help but feel uncomfortable again. Was it even my mother's money to offer? If Kyle contributed as my mother claimed, what were his motivations? Did he pressure her to offer the money as some kind of power play? Maybe to gain leverage over me or even buy his way into the family. The more I think about it, the more uncomfortable I feel. This is no longer just about the wedding. It's about the bigger picture of what's going on in my mother's life. Joan also mentioned that my mother's behavior has been increasingly erratic lately. She's making impulsive decisions, distancing herself from her lifelong friends, and seems completely absorbed by her relationship with Kyle. It's as if she lives in this bubble, so caught up in the whirlwind that she can't or doesn't want to see what's really going on. I decided to try contacting my mother again, but this time I took a completely different approach. Instead of mentioning the wedding or going over previous arguments, I focused on her well-being. I told her that I had heard that she was withdrawing large amounts of money and asked her if everything was okay. I tried to make it clear that I was not judging or accusing her of anything. I just wanted to check on her situation because I was genuinely concerned. I emphasized that this came from a place of love, not criticism, and that I just wanted to make sure she was safe and happy. Her response was harsh, to say the least. She immediately became defensive and accused me of trying to sabotage her happiness. She said that everyone around her is jealous of her relationship with Kyle and went on a tirade about how no one understands what they have together. And then, to top it all off, she made a comment that hit me hard. She said that I am just like my father, overprotective and controlling. Hearing that was like a slap in the face. My father was an extraordinary man, loving, stable, and always looking out for our family. If standing up for what is right or worrying about his decisions makes me like him, then honestly, I will take it as a compliment. But I know she didn't mean it like that. She said it to hurt me, and she succeeded. What makes this all the more difficult is that she is now spreading her version of events to other family members. She has been telling people that I am trying to control her life and that I don't wish her happiness. My cousin Jen called me last night, confused and concerned, asking what was going on because my mother had been venting to her about how I am supposedly pushing her away and trying to dictate their relationship. It's exhausting having to explain myself repeatedly, but I'm doing my best to stay calm and stick to the facts. Fortunately, most of my family seem to see through the narrative she's creating. People like Jen, my Uncle Robert, and even my Aunt Linda have all been incredibly supportive. They know me and know that I have never tried to hurt my mother or control her decisions. Even so, it is very stressful to feel that I must continue to defend myself while also trying to manage everything else during the wedding preparations. As much as I want to believe that this will eventually pass, I am beginning to accept the possibility that it will not. My mother seems firmly rooted in her decisions at the moment, and Kyle's influence on her seems undeniable. The possibility of my mother missing my wedding, one of the most important days of my life, is devastating. But at the same time, I'm trying to redirect my attention to the people who will be there. People who genuinely love and support Nathan and me. I still hold out a little hope that my mother will have a change of heart. Maybe one day she'll wake up and realize what she's doing. Or maybe someone like Jen or Linda will finally talk some sense into her. But I also know that I can't pin all my hopes on that possibility. I must prepare myself for the reality that she might not be there. Throughout all of this, something I have held on to is the certainty that I have done everything possible to reach out and fix things. I have tried to meet her halfway, to stay calm, and to focus on the love I feel for her. If she still chooses not to show up, then that is up to her, not me. At the end of the day, this wedding is about Nathan and me. It's about the love we share and the life we are building together. That's where my energy should be. I refuse to let this situation steal the joy from what is supposed to be a beautiful and happy event in our lives. I will update you all after the wedding to let you know how everything goes. In the meantime, thank you so much for all the support, advice, and kind words you have shared with me during this process. I really can't thank you enough. Update 3. The wedding was yesterday, and honestly, I'm still trying to sort through all the emotions swirling around in my mind. It was a truly beautiful day, one that I will never forget, but it was not without its challenges. Some moments were magical and filled with so much love, while others were, well, complicated. To my surprise, my mother did attend, but characteristically, she arrived at the last possible moment, approximately 15 minutes before the ceremony was due to start. She came alone, which was honestly a relief because Kyle was not with her. I couldn't help but experience a wave of conflicting emotions when I saw her. On the one hand, I was glad she came, but on the other, her energy was remarkably strange. She didn't really speak to me, she didn't ask how I was feeling, and she remained distant. Outwardly, she looked fine, well-groomed and calm, but there was something beneath the surface that felt disconnected. It was as if she were physically present but emotionally absent. The ceremony itself, however, was everything I could have wished for and more. Having Uncle Robert walk me down the aisle was such a powerful and emotional moment. Over the years, I have thought a lot about my father and how much I have missed having him here. As Uncle Robert and I walked together, I felt this overwhelming sense of gratitude towards him for always being there when I needed someone to fill that void. I looked at him and could see that he was holding back tears, which almost made me lose my composure too. It was just such a moving moment, one that reminded me of how much love and support I really have in my life. The ceremony was beautiful and everything went smoothly. The sun was shining, the flowers looked perfect, and everyone seemed so happy to be there. Nathan and I couldn't have asked for a more perfect setting to start our life together. The reception was equally lovely, the dinner was delicious, the speeches were heartfelt, and the dance floor was packed with everyone having a great time. It was exactly what Nathan and I had imagined, a day full of love, laughter, and celebration. But then there was my mother. Her behavior during the reception was strange. She sat with a group of relatives and mostly kept to herself. She didn't really interact with anyone beyond small, polite conversation, and she made no effort to talk to me or Nathan, honestly. Part of me was relieved because I didn't want any conflict, but another part felt hurt. It was as if she intentionally kept her distance, which only emphasized how tense things had become between us. And then, without any ceremony or even a goodbye, she disappeared. I only realized she had left when I asked someone if they had seen her, and they informed me that she had left shortly after dinner. That hurt more than I anticipated. I didn't expect her to stay overnight, but to leave silently without telling me. It felt like another subtle way of reminding me of our current situation. This morning I woke up to a long text message from my mom, and I was completely devastated. In it, she confessed that Kyle had left her 3 days ago. Not only did he leave, but he also took a significant amount of her money. She said that initially she hadn't wanted to inform anyone because she felt ashamed, which broke my heart even more. In her message, she apologized for her behavior during the run-up to the wedding. She admitted that she had been dealing with depression, especially with the anniversary of my father's death approaching. She said she was not in a good emotional state, and that made her more vulnerable than she acknowledged. Reading those words caused a mixture of sadness and frustration in me. On the one hand, it was the first time that she had really acknowledged that her actions had hurt me. On the other, it made me question why it took her hitting rock bottom to see what was happening. She also admitted something I had suspected for some time. Kyle had been taking advantage of her from the beginning. She mentioned that Joan is helping her figure out what to do next, and they plan to file a police report about the money he took. Even so, my mom sounded doubtful that she would ever get any of that money back, and that part of the message was especially hard to read because she clearly feels so defeated right now. But then there was something in her message that gave me a small ray of hope. She said she will finally start therapy. After everything that has happened, that honestly feels like the first truly positive step she has taken in a long time. Knowing that she is at least considering seeking professional help seems like progress, even if it is only a small step in the right direction. Although I am relieved to see her beginning to accept everything, It doesn't erase how much her actions hurt me during what should have been one of the happiest moments of my life. Her words seem sincere, but the pain she caused doesn't go away instantly. It will take time for me to process everything and determine how to move forward with her. Nathan, as always, has been my unconditional support. He has been so understanding, encouraging me to take my time and not to rush into any decisions regarding my mother. He even suggested family therapy later on, which I think might be a good idea. For now, however, I am concentrating on allowing myself to feel everything, both the pain and the hope. Right now, we're on a little honeymoon in a cozy cabin by the lake. And it's been exactly what I needed. We spend our days taking long walks, cooking together, and just enjoying the tranquility. It's been so relaxing to disconnect from everything and focus on the present. Every time I look at Nathan, I feel so grateful to have him by my side. Looking ahead, I'm trying to stay hopeful. My mother's message seemed like a step in the right direction, even if it's not enough to fix everything yet. I'm still hurt. It will take time to rebuild that trust, but I also know that people make mistakes, especially when they're going through difficult times. I'm trying to keep that in mind as I figure out where we're going from here. For now, my attention is on this new chapter with Nathan. Being newlyweds is such a special and exciting time, and I want to enjoy it fully without allowing conflict to overshadow our happiness. I know the road ahead with my mother could be complicated, but I choose to believe that better days are ahead for both of us. Thank you to everyone who has followed my story and shared their advice, support, and kind words. It has meant more to me than you could ever imagine. Here's to a future full of love, healing, and brighter times ahead.